Men believe awakening is a sudden act, a flash of light that transforms them instantly. But here lies the error. True awakening is a war, not a festival. The problem is simple: you seek freedom of the spirit, yet remain chained by habits, illusions, and weaknesses. In this discourse, we will uncover what the awakened slowly abandon, and why only through this abandonment can strength, clarity, and dominion over life be attained. Niccolò Machiavelli once said that men are blinded not by ignorance, but by the comfort of their illusions. In this lesson, I speak not to the crowd, but to the few who dare to rise above. For the spiritually awake are not saints. They are warriors of the mind who retreat from what weakens them. Their awakening is not loud, but silent, not sudden, but deliberate. And in this silence they learn to quit certain things slowly, yet with finality. Men deceive themselves into thinking that awakening grants them dominion over the world. They believe that clarity of vision will make others obey, that wisdom will compel the ignorant to bow. But this is the first great illusion. The spiritually awake abandon the illusion of control over others. Consider how most men spend their days. They wrestle with their wives, their sons, their companions, even their servants, attempting to force them into obedience. They argue, plead, they threaten. And yet, what happens? Those who appear to bend often do so out of fear or convenience, never out of true submission. When the force weakens, their loyalty evaporates. Thus, the man who wastes his strength trying to rule the wills of others finds himself weakened, distracted, and betrayed. The spiritually awake see this futility with growing clarity. They come to understand that no man can truly command the heart of another, nor bend the soul of another to his design. Yes, one may rule through fear or sway through promises, but such power is temporary, fragile, and always dependent on circumstances beyond one's control. The awakened withdraw from this game, for they know that the pursuit of control over others is the pursuit of smoke. Do not mistake this abandonment for weakness. No, it is a sign of superior strength, for the awakened shift their gaze inward. They turn their energy away from the fruitless task of managing every man's thoughts and instead focus on the only dominion that is absolute mastery over themselves. It is here in the governance of one's own desires, fears, and impulses that true power resides. A man who cannot rule himself is fit to rule no one, and a man who has achieved mastery over himself commands respect without needing to demand it. Observe the difference. The common man enters a room and insists on being heard, insists on being obeyed, insists on proving his superiority. The awakened man enters the same room in silence. His restraint, his composure, his unshakable self-command speak louder than 1,000 shouts. Others, though they may not admit it, feel his weight. They listen, not because they are forced, but because they cannot ignore him. This is the paradox. By abandoning the illusion of control over others, the awakened gain a natural authority more enduring than fear and more persuasive than empty words. Why does this matter? Because most men suffer endlessly in their relationships, their work, their ambitions, precisely because they are enslaved by this illusion. They believe their happiness depends on bending others to their will. The husband believes his wife must change. The ruler believes his people must obey without question. The teacher believes every student must think as he thinks. In this endless pursuit, frustration is inevitable because the will of others is like the wind. It cannot be chained. The awakened man accepts this truth and frees himself from the torment of expectation. Yet the process is slow. One does not wake up one morning and suddenly cease trying to control others. The habit runs deep, tied to pride and ego. But with each failure, each betrayal, with each moment of resistance, the awakened begin to see the pattern. They start to withdraw their energy from this futile struggle and redirect it inward, to self, mastery, discipline, and clarity. Slowly they quit the illusion of control, and in quitting they become stronger, freer, and more formidable than those who still chase the wind. Look at the world around you and you will see men drowning not in hardship, but in distractions. Carry devices that ring with endless noise. They fill their hours with entertainment, gossip, and trivial pursuits. They seek novelty, not wisdom. They chase pleasure, and in this endless pursuit of distraction, they become hollow, restless, and weak. The spiritually awake begin to see this poison for what it is, and they slowly withdraw from it. Understand this distraction is the enemy of clarity. A man who is constantly entertained, constantly engaged in the noise of the world, loses the ability to hear his own thoughts. He becomes like a leaf blown about by every gust of wind. He cannot sit in silence, for silence terrifies him. He cannot be alone, for solitude exposes the emptiness of his soul. This is why the common man fills his life with endless diversions, because without them, he would have to confront himself. The awakened, however, no longer run from themselves. They endure the silence, and in doing so, they grow. But this abandonment of distractions does not come in one swift act. No man throws away every comfort at once. Instead, the spiritually awake peel away their diversions layer by layer. The games that waste their hours begin to feel tasteless. The endless chatter of gossip begins to sound meaningless. The shallow pleasures that once excited them begin to feel empty. One by one, these distractions lose their power, not because the man hates pleasure, but because he no longer finds strength in it. His mind, sharpened by awakening, seeks substance instead of noise. Consider the ruler who spends his days at feasts, drowning in wine and laughter. The people may adore him for his charm, but when crisis arrives, he is unprepared, his mind dulled by indulgence. Contrast him with the ruler who restrains his pleasures, who cuts away the distractions that weaken his focus. He may appear less joyful to the crowd, but when fortune turns, his discipline makes him unshakable. The same is true for the awakened individual. By abandoning empty distractions, he preserves his clarity, his energy, and his strength. The crowd does not understand this. They look at the awakened and think them cold, withdrawn, or severe. They cannot comprehend how a man finds more satisfaction in solitude than in endless entertainment. Yet this misunderstanding is proof of the difference between the common and the uncommon. For the awakened know that every moment lost to triviality is a moment stolen from their growth. They do not despise pleasure, but they no longer worship it. They taste it like a spice, not like a meal. This is why the spiritually awake slowly reduce their indulgence in distractions. They begin to see the trap, that constant stimulation weakens the will, dulls the mind, and erodes the ability to stand firm. They recognize that a distracted man is easy to control, while a focused man is dangerous, so they choose focus. They cut away the noise piece by piece until silence becomes their companion and clarity their weapon. What others see as emptiness, the awakened see as strength. One of the deepest chains that bind men is their hunger for approval. They measure their worth by the smiles of others, they shape their actions to win applause, and they live in constant fear of rejection. This is the way of the common man, to beg silently for validation, to kneel before the judgment of the crowd. But the spiritually awake come to see this craving as a poison, and slowly they abandon it. Think carefully, the masses are fickle. Today they praise you, tomorrow they curse you. Their loyalty is not built on truth but on convenience. A man who lives to please the crowd has no foundation, for his actions change with the wind. He laughs when they laugh, he weeps when they weep, and in the end, he loses all sense of who he is. The awakened refuse to be slaves to such a shifting master. They learn that the masses respect strength, not flattery, and that the approval of fools is worth nothing. Yet this detachment does not come at once. For many years, a man may spend his life in pursuit of admiration, building his identity on the fragile soil of public opinion. The spiritually awake begin to recognize the trap through disappointment. They see how quickly the same lips that praise can turn to scorn. They see how bending too often to please others leads to resentment, not love. Slowly, the illusion cracks. Slowly, they begin to withdraw their energy from the endless pursuit of applause. Do not mistake this for arrogance. The awakened are not reckless or blind to the opinions of men. They understand that appearances matter, that reputation has power. Machiavelli himself taught that a prince must appear virtuous, even if he is not. Here lies the difference. The awakened use appearances as a tool, not as a master. They present themselves strategically. Within, they remain unmoved by praise or condemnation. They know the crowd admires today what it despises tomorrow, and they refuse to let such instability dictate their course. Consider the leader who constantly adjusts his laws to satisfy the shifting moods of the people. He wins momentary favor, but in the long term, he breeds chaos. Compare him with the leader who stands firm, who listens but does not bend to every cry. Though he may be hated at times, he is respected for his strength. The spiritually awake live the same way. They stop performing for every audience and instead act with purpose rooted in clarity. This is why men who are awakening often appear more solitary, more defiant, even more feared. They no longer laugh at every joke to fit in. They no longer nod in agreement to gain approval. They no longer exhaust themselves trying to prove their worth to those who never cared for it. Instead, they turn inward, measuring themselves not by the unstable voice of the masses, but by the quiet discipline of their own spirit. And this shift is powerful, for once a man is free from the need to please, he cannot be controlled by shame, by rejection, or by threats of exclusion. He becomes untouchable in a way that frightens those still bound by the crowd's chains. Among the greatest illusions that chain men is the belief that they can control fortune itself. They labor endlessly to guarantee results. They build expectations as if the world were obliged to obey their plans. And when reality shifts, they collapse in despair. The spiritually awake recognize the futility of such attachment, and slowly they abandon it. Understand this well: no man, no matter how cunning or powerful, commands the turning of fortune's wheel. A farmer may plant with care, yet storms may destroy his harvest. A general may march with discipline, yet one chance mistake can turn victory into defeat. A lover may give his heart fully, yet betrayal can strike without warning. Life is not an agreement that ensures reward for effort. It is a battlefield where forces beyond our reach move constantly, and only a fool believes he can dictate every outcome. The common man, however, clings to this illusion. He says to himself, "If I do everything right, if I follow the rules, if I please the right people, I will get what I deserve." But when the result fails him, when the world does not deliver the prize he expected, his spirit breaks. He curses fate, he drowns in bitterness, and he grows weak. The awakened are different. They prepare, they strategize, they fight with all their strength. Yet they remain unbound to the result. They know fortune often rewards the bold, but they do not crumble when fortune withholds her favor. This detachment is not learned in a single moment. It is cultivated through repeated blows of disappointment. Each time an outcome slips away despite their effort, the awakened see more clearly. The world is not theirs to command, only themselves. With time, they begin to shift their focus inward, asking not, "Did I win what I wanted?" but rather, "Did I conduct myself with strength, clarity, and discipline?" For the awakened man, success is measured not only by outcomes, but by the unshakable control he maintains over his mind in the face of outcomes. Yet let us be precise. To quit attachment to outcomes does not mean to abandon ambition or cease striving. Machiavelli himself taught that men must be bold, must act decisively, must seize opportunities when fortune presents them. The spiritually awake pursue their goals with fierceness. But what sets them apart is this: they pursue without desperation. They act without clinging. They sharpen their strategy. They exert their will. But when the result escapes them, they do not shatter. They bend, adapt, and continue forward. Iron bends under pressure yet does not break. Consider two rulers. One becomes obsessed with victory, believing he cannot live without it. When battle is lost, pride is crushed, and his kingdom falls into despair with him. The other ruler fights just as fiercely, but when defeat comes, he steadies himself, regroups his army, and prepares for the next opportunity. His detachment from outcomes saves him, for he is not ruled by disappointment. The awakened follow this second path. They quit their addiction to certainty and learn to dance with fortune, rather than trying to chain her. In this slow withdrawal from attachment, they gain freedom, for the man who is attached to outcomes is a slave to results, controlled by victory, destroyed by failure. The man who acts with focus yet releases the outcome cannot be broken. He understands that power lies not in securing fortune's every favor, in meeting her turns with unshakable composure and relentless will. Most men imagine that strength is measured by the size of the crowd around them. They boast of friends, they delight in company, they believe that being surrounded by many voices is proof of importance. Yet the spiritually awake soon discover the opposite. Weak companionships do not strengthen, they weaken. To walk among men of little discipline, little vision, little courage, is to drink poison daily while expecting to grow stronger. And so slowly they begin to quit such company. Look at how the common man chooses his companions. He seeks comfort. He surrounds himself with those who flatter his pride, who distract him from his emptiness, who share in his vices. They laugh together. The laughter is hollow. They encourage one another, but the encouragement is towards indulgence, not greatness. And when hardship comes, these companions vanish like shadows at dawn. The spiritually awake learn to see this pattern, and the more they awaken, the less tolerance they have for weak company. But this withdrawal is not immediate. Even the strongest men are tempted by the warmth of the crowd, by the illusion of friendship. The spiritually awake must tear themselves slowly from such circles, piece by piece. At first, they notice how much time is wasted in idle chatter. Then they notice how easily they are drawn into mediocrity by those who fear ambition. Finally, they notice that every step they wish to climb is resisted by companions who would rather remain at the bottom. This realization is painful, for it often means walking away from familiar faces. But awakening demands sacrifice, and one of the greatest sacrifices is the abandonment of weak alliances. Do not confuse this with arrogance or isolation. The awakened are not hostile to all men, nor do they despise companionship itself. What they abandon is not friendship, weak friendship. They no longer cling to those who drain them, who waste their time, who dull their edge. Instead, they begin to choose with the precision of a prince choosing his generals. They seek those who sharpen their mind, who challenge their thinking, Elevate their strength rather than weaken it. Consider how a ruler falls when he surrounds himself with flatterers. They feed his pride, they hide the truth, they encourage his worst impulses. His kingdom suffers because no one dares to tell him when he is wrong. Contrast this with the ruler who selects companions of discipline, wisdom, and courage. They may disagree with him, they may even confront him, but they do so from strength, not weakness. Such a ruler grows more formidable because his circle strengthens rather than corrupts him. The spiritually awake apply the same principle to their own lives. The masses cannot understand this. They look at the awakened man, fewer in friends, often walking alone, and they pity him. They say he has lost his joy, that he is cold, that he has withdrawn. They mistake solitude for weakness when in truth it is strength. For the awakened know this better to stand alone in clarity than to stand surrounded by fools. Companionship is a chain, binding a man to mediocrity, while strong companionship is a weapon, sharpening him for greatness. And so, the spiritually awake quit the former without hesitation, even if it leaves them in silence, for they know that silence is stronger than the noise of weak men. Among all the fears that haunt men, few are as powerful as the fear of being alone. They dread the quiet of an empty room, they panic when left without company, and they run endlessly into the arms of others to escape themselves. This is why men surround themselves with noise, with chatter, with distractions. For in solitude their soul is exposed, and they are forced to face the truth of who they are. The spiritually awake, unlike the multitude, learn to quit this fear. They do not conquer it suddenly, but little by little, until solitude becomes not their enemy, their ally. Observe how the common man behaves when left alone. He reaches immediately for diversion, a voice, a device, a drink, anything that spares him from silence, because in silence, his insecurities rise. He sees the emptiness of his desires, the weakness of his discipline, the lies he tells himself. Solitude is a mirror, and most men cannot bear to look at themselves too closely. So they flee into company, even if that company is shallow, destructive, or false. They would rather be surrounded by noise than face the quiet truth of their own soul. The spiritually awake, however, slowly break this pattern. At first, they feel the same discomfort. The silence presses against them, the loneliness bites. But instead of fleeing, they endure. They sit in the emptiness and allow the discomfort to speak. And as they do, they discover something the masses never will. Solitude is not emptiness, it is strength. It strips away the illusions that society builds, it sharpens the mind, and it tempers the spirit. Where others fear silence, the awakened find clarity. This shift happens gradually. In the beginning, the awakened may still crave company, still feel restless in isolation. But over time, they learn to use solitude as a forge. They reflect, they plan, they sharpen their inner weapons. In solitude, they confront their weaknesses honestly, without distraction or disguise. In solitude, they strengthen their will, free from the influence of weak companions. In solitude, they rise above the endless noise of the world. The fear of being alone transforms into the power of standing alone. Consider a ruler who cannot bear to be without counsel, who fears every quiet moment. Such a man becomes the puppet of advisors, of flatterers, of sycophants. He cannot think for himself, and so his throne is weak. Compare him with a ruler who values solitude, who withdraws often to think, to reflect, to strengthen his resolve. His decisions are not dictated by the crowd, but born from the discipline of his own mind. This ruler is formidable, for he is guided by inner clarity rather than outer noise. The spiritually awake adopt this same principle in their lives. The crowd cannot understand this. They see a man walking alone and think him lonely. They see him in silence and think him sad. They cannot comprehend that solitude can be chosen, that silence can be a weapon. The awakened man does not avoid others, but he does not depend on them. He enjoys companionship, but he is not enslaved by it. He can stand among men as their equal, but he can also stand apart as their superior. And this is the final proof of awakening. When solitude ceases to be feared and becomes embraced, a man becomes unbreakable, for nothing terrifies him anymore, not even the silence within himself. Awakening is not the gaining of some mystical light, but the stripping away of illusions. One by one, the spiritually awake quit what weakens them: the illusion of controlling others, the endless lure of distractions, the slavery of pleasing the masses, chains of attachment to outcomes, the burden of weak companions, and the fear of solitude. Each of these is abandoned slowly, not because awakening is easy, because it is a deliberate war against the habits of ordinary men. Understand this well: the awakened do not seek comfort, they seek clarity. They do not chase applause, they chase strength. They do not bow to fortune, they learn to endure her storms with composure. And in quitting these things, piece by piece, they rise above the multitude. This is the path Machiavelli would have you see. Power is not found in illusions, but in discipline. Freedom is not given. It is earned by stripping away what enslaves you, and the man who has quit weakness slowly stands not as a servant of the world, but as its master.